Fellow citizens, as we settle into our various routines, wherever and whatever that might be, I trust that we all had a joyous Christmas season, shared with family, friends, and community spirit. As we reflect on the arrival of 2018 and all that it holds for us, let us spare a thought or a prayer for those individuals and families who have been victims of violent crime from one direction or another. Their pain is our pain. And even as the new year has opened with reports of continued murderous scourge in our land, I want to appeal to all citizens to keep hope alive in this war against the career violent criminals and heartless family members. We must continue to support the police in the national effort, which last year saw 1,064 firearms of all description and 18,000 rounds of ammunition confiscated. Record numbers for the Caribbean, yet we face almost record killings. Additionally, over 12,000 persons were arrested last year. We must and we will win this war on crime. New approaches are at work in the SSA, and new energy is beginning to infect the ranks of the police service. And already, we are seeing improvements in response and detections. Notwithstanding many huge negatives which still exist, we are heading in the right direction. We need to increase speed on all fronts so that we can get to that destination of safety and security which the population deserves. With leadership and effective action all around, from the home to the parliament, from the schoolyard to the police station, we will overcome the violent few who are determined to make hell out of this paradise which we have inherited as our homeland. As we launch out in 2018, I take this opportunity to come into your homes or wherever you are to tell you a bit of what we have been doing, what we have done, and what we'll be doing in the year ahead. Most importantly, I want to tell you why we have done or are doing some of the things which we have set about to do on your behalf. As you are well aware by now, for quite some time, our economy has been facing a decline in the production of oil and gas, two commodities that make the main contribution to our gross national product, to government revenues, to exports, and for foreign exchange earnings. Energy sector revenues were hit by a dramatic collapse in international oil and gas prices and our own low production levels. The combination of these factors gave rise to a sharp decline of over 90% in revenues coming from our energy sector in a short 2-year period. To illustrate the extent of our predicament, oil prices fell from $106 per barrel in June 2014 to $30 per barrel in February 2016, which coincidentally was just 5 months after this PNM returned to government. Given the significant contribution of the energy sector to government tax receipts, total government revenue fell by a similar amount. The resulting fiscal deficit was financed by ad hoc arrangements, including billions of dollars in short-term loans from the domestic banking system, many which came due in 2016, the first year of the new government. Part of the expenditure splurge of 2014-2015 reflected a 14% wage increase to public servants, which created an obligation for back pay, which was initially promised to be paid before the end of fiscal 2015. A balance of over $5 billion was left for the incoming administration to deliver. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the background against which the new PNM administration assumed office in September 2015. At the time, many people sympathized that this was not the election to win, as our new administration could not continue with the largesse of the recent past. After taking stock of the economic situation, our government immediately embarked on a fiscal consolidation program whose main obstacle was the fiscal deficit, the driver of our public debt situation, which had increased at an uncomfortable pace. The public debt, in fact, increased by 70% over the 2010 to 2015 period, from $45 billion to $76 billion. As the oil price shock became a long-term structural industry change rather than a short-term cyclical phenomenon, it was clear that we had to strengthen our domestic revenue base and reduce our heavy reliance on energy revenues. While the achievement of strong and diversified economic growth was also considered an urgent objective, we were convinced then, as indeed we are now, that the restoration of fiscal and external stability was urgent and an essential prerequisite to economic diversification. Our most immediate task, therefore, was to stabilize the economy, and in particular, government spending, which was completely out of control when we came in. The available accounts in the central bank had been used up. The overdraft had been used up. The $16 billion investment retention at NGC had been used up. The Green Fund had been mortgaged. And in addition to this, government contracting and debt to contractors, large and small, were at an all-time high. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be less than honest if I do not concede that the first 2 years of the fiscal consolidation strategy have been very difficult. I can only say with satisfaction that we have made important progress in that we have begun to successfully address some of our entrenched vulnerabilities and to make the hard decisions that are indispensable to our long-term economic survival. Even so, as we struggled with the existing high debt load, this new assignment could not have been done without resorting to new borrowing to prevent the economy from collapsing completely. In these difficult times, the government gets voluminous divergent advice from a variety of quarters, none of which is without some element of negative side effects. One persistent view from some prominent quarters is that we have not cut expenditure sufficiently and should have made much deeper cuts at the beginning of our tenure. These kinds of advice, useful and informed as they are, usually are never accompanied by any list of the consequences of such actions as advised. It would have been a much more arid and barren land had we not managed the last 2 years with a steady hand, making the adjustments along the way with far less available revenue. Our future would have been far less hopeful than it is now. Ladies and gentlemen, we started our adjustment program immediately in late 2015, when we ordered a 7% cut in public expenditure, except personnel. We also took initial additional steps to reduce expenditure, including a phased reduction in fuel subsidies. It's worth recalling that prior to 2015, the government had spent as much as $7 billion per year subsidizing the cost of gasoline and diesel, a subsidy that can no longer be afforded, nor is it the highest priority when funds are desperately scarce. We systematically lowered overall expenditure from $63 billion in 2015 to a budgeted $52 billion in 2018. In order to have a development program, this lowered figure of $52 billion includes a $10 billion gap to be filled by borrowings and asset sales. Without these initiatives, and in the face of the much lower national budget, then overall economic collapse was the alternative, given the dominant role that government expenditure plays in sustaining the national economy in both the public and the private sector. On the revenue side, we took steps to restore the original purpose and intent of the value-added tax, which had been severely undermined in 2012 when some 7,000 non-essential items were exempted from VAT for purely political reasons. Along with restoring VAT to primarily non-essential items, we reduced the rate from 15% to 12.5% to soften the impact on consumers. Our first year in office was particularly challenging, as energy revenues fell by a further 50% in that year alone because of a further decline in oil and gas prices, compounded by the fact that petroleum companies made full use of the inordinately generous fiscal incentives negotiated in 2014, where oil and gas companies were given the ability to engage in accelerated write-off of capital expenses. In fact, because of the decline in petroleum prices and the impact of the concessions, some petroleum companies have paid no corporation taxes at all over the last 2 years. The chronic financial difficulties at Petrotrin have further exacerbated this problem because although Petrotrin produces over 50% of the country's oil, it is not paying its oil royalties and taxes in any timely manner or at all, which is an unacceptable state of affairs that will not be allowed to continue in 2018. Currently, Petrotrin as a company owes the government $2.75 billion, of which $588 million is Supplemental Petroleum Tax, a tax that only becomes due during times of high oil prices, yet it has not been paid then. What this means is that even as oil prices have rebounded somewhat, the structures in place conspire to ensure that the government obtains precious little consequential increase in revenues. With a sharp drop in government revenues, we were unable to immediately meet all the arrears of back pay for public servants left by the previous administration. However, we managed to negotiate a solution with the relevant unions and have paid the billions of dollars over a 2-year period. Incidentally, I have never heard this mentioned by a single labor leader. Voices that are routinely condemnatory and accusatory where government actions are concerned. In that first year, we met our budget financing commitments with the aid of some one-off revenues in the form of extraordinary dividends from state enterprises and from asset sales. We also had the first ever drawdown from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund and relied upon the proceeds of a very successful $1 billion international bond placement. For the fiscal year 2017, the government announced a broader range of revenue measures, including increases in the rate of income tax on chargeable incomes from individuals and companies in excess of $1 million, the so-called millionaire tax, increases in taxes on alcohol and tobacco, and a 7% levy on online purchases. 2 other revenue initiatives that were announced in the 2017 budget could not be implemented as proposed. Property tax faced legal and legislative challenges, and the proposal to revise gambling and gaming tax legislation was held up in the Joint Select Committee of Parliament. However, we expect to make significant progress on these 2 items in 2018. Expenditure measures contained in the 2017 budget included the second phase of the reduction in the fuel subsidy, the revision of GATE based on means testing, and further cuts in capital expenditure allocations. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to make it clear that I'm fully aware of the impact of expenditure cuts on the macro and microeconomy and the effect of these cuts on people. We know that it's tough on everyone, but there are few better or painless options. We just have to take our medicine and work hard towards the cure that we are confident can be had. However, through the reduction in fuel subsidies, streamlining of expenditure on goods and services, cutting out waste and unnecessary spending, and rationalization of infrastructure investment, between 2015 and 2017, government expenditure has been cut by 20%. This sizable expenditure cut has had a significant knock-on effect on economic growth in the non-energy sector, and to some extent, delays in making payments to contractors and suppliers. However, through it all, we have managed to fulfill our responsibilities in terms of essential payments, such as public sector wages and salaries, healthcare delivery, education, national security, pension and social welfare benefits. With our careful and measured approach, we have managed to keep our head above water and have the country running without social and economic chaos. I want to assure you, however, that in making these expenditure cuts, your government has sought as far as possible to focus on cutting out waste and inefficiency. I want to assure you, however, that in making these expenditure cuts, your government has sought as far as possible to focus on cutting out waste and inefficiency, on maintaining a balance, and on protecting the most vulnerable and on preserving jobs. We have also declared war on corruption in the public sector. To this end, we have made significant progress in identifying white-collar criminals and are tracking and holding to account individuals and entities that made fast and loose with public trust and public monies. A few of them are already on their way to the courthouse to answer for their dastardly actions. In April 2017, following upon our sudden change of fortunes, the international rating agencies Moody's and Standard & Poor's each downgraded Trinidad and Tobago by 1 notch. Moody's downgrade was to a sub-investment grade of BA1, while Standard & Poor's rating kept us at an investment grade of BBB+. This unavoidable development had the additional negative effect of having us become liable to repay a $100 million debt immediately. Difficult as that was, we were able to comply so as to stave off even graver consequences. The level of public debt at about 62% of GDP is now considered to be at the high end of the range for a country rated as investment grade. While our level of foreign debt at around 15% of GDP is considered moderate, our debt profile is complicated by $8.4 billion stock of short-term debt engaged in by the previous government. Our public debt service payments at over $7 billion per year are also considered high in a total national expenditure package of around $52 billion. This means that scarce resources that should be allocated for productive investment, for capital development, and social programs are now being consumed in debt service for loans, some of which were of dubious value. This government has taken stock of the poor approach to debt management that existed and is now ensuring that new loans are in the longer-term maturity range. We have also accessed new sources of funding from multilateral agencies such as the CAF and the IDB, and as difficult as the situation is, we have managed to stay within our public debt target of 65% of GDP over the medium term. We know that additional measures are needed over time to deal with this major external shock, but the government also has the responsibility to take into account how much the society can bear at any given time. And that is why we have decided to use some of our fiscal buffers, such as the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, for the purpose they were intended, and to spread out the adjustment over a period of time. The 2018 budget saw a virtual end to fuel subsidies, the introduction of a 35% corporation tax rate for banks, and the introduction of a 12.5% royalty for petroleum companies, as well as higher taxes for the gambling industry. All of this was in keeping with our policy that everyone must share in the burden of adjustment, each according to his ability to contribute. The government is also working assiduously to complete the legislative and other formalities that are needed to start the implementation of the property tax and the introduction of the much-needed revenue authority. We are thus confident that barring another external shock, this comprehensive revenue generation package and continued expenditure restraint will lead to a significant reduction in the overall deficit as we go forward. Fellow citizens, there are two fallacies about our government's approach to economic policy making that are being propagated that I would like to debunk at this juncture. The first is that the adjustment is being borne disproportionately by the lower income groups. This is obviously incorrect and nothing more than political posturing on the part of some and deliberate misinformation on the part of others. The facts are that the government has taken great pains to ensure that the burden of adjustment is widely spread and that measures are always put in place to ease the impact on the poor. Let me quote just a few of these examples. In the 2016 budget, the personal income tax allowance was increased from $60,000 a year to $72,000 a year. This allows an estimated 59,000 lower income workers to escape the income tax net and provided an additional income to those earning under $6,000 per month. In contrast, the income tax rate for individuals and corporations with taxable income in excess of $1 million was increased from 25% to 30%. Basic food commodities that comprise a large share of the budget of the lower income groups continue to be VAT exempt. The changes to the GATE program, which are based on means testing, continue to favor lower income groups. Thus, for example, students whose monthly family income is $10,000 and below continue to enjoy free tertiary education. Those with monthly family incomes between $10,000 and $30,000 pay 50% of tuition fees, while those with monthly family incomes that exceed $30,000 receive no GATE subsidy. Medical supplies for chronic ailments continue to be available as a great relief through CDAP. The government continues to hugely subsidize electricity and water rates, air and sea transportation, and mortgages for low-income houses constructed under government programs. It is to be noted that some taxi fare increases are far larger than warranted by the increase in the diesel price. I would hope that the consumers are not being exploited, particularly when one takes into account the fact that maxi taxi owners continue to enjoy waivers from VAT, import duties, and motor vehicle taxes on purchase of their vehicles. What is not acceptable is that some maxi taxi operators using low-price CNG have increased their fares in step with diesel-powered maxis, even though the price of CNG has not been increased. The second fallacy being peddled by some opposition critics is that an adjustment program is not really needed at all, and that the money is available to continue the spending levels to which we have become accustomed. Fellow citizens, the truth is that the hydrocarbon-dependent economies like us are going through radical adjustment exercises. For example, the Gulf oil countries have more than $1.3 trillion in sovereign wealth funds. Yet the ongoing period of low oil prices is serving as a catalyst for a whole series of reforms in these oil-dependent countries of the Middle East. The United Arab Emirates is involved in a strategic roadmap aimed to help chart a direction in a world of $30 oil. Analysts interpret this step as a message from the country's government to its population that economic reforms, including painful and unpopular ones, would be necessary to maintain sustainable economic growth over the medium to long term. The United Arab Emirates government has already started with a number of cost-saving measures, including the restructuring of the national oil company, involving streamlining operations and job cuts, and the announcement of value-added tax for the first time on many consumer goods. Other countries in the Middle East, such as Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, have also begun to increase the price of fuel and reduce basic subsidies across the board. The naked truth is that for a small hydrocarbon-based economy like Trinidad and Tobago, fiscal adjustment and economic diversification are no longer just options. They are essential requirements for long-term growth and stability, and I dare say survival. Ladies and gentlemen, this government is very committed to work towards overall fiscal balance by 2021 through continued prudent expenditure management combined with additional non-energy revenue mobilization efforts and economic diversification. We must strive to achieve this balance, as we cannot continue to operate with large fiscal deficits for much longer. Simply put, we cannot continue to spend more than we earn. We cannot borrow our way out of this situation. We have a limited amount of assets that can or should be sold to meet expenses. It is said that necessity is the mother of invention, and it often forces us to become innovative, and this government is thus very open to walking new pathways. Take, for example, our new housing initiative. The government currently lacks the funding to construct houses at the rate that we did in the past. But we are committed to providing affordable housing to as many people as possible. So what have we done? We have developed a policy where we are encouraging the private sector to get involved in the financing and construction of public housing. Housing units built to the government specification and at affordable prices will be the subject of a grant of up to $100,000 for each completed unit that is sold to applicants on the HDC's database. The HDC has already reported private sector expressions of interest in 2,600 units at 14 locations nationwide, from Malabar to Maruga, from Cora to Corinth. In this way, the government's scarce resources can be refocused on the provision of more rental accommodation and low-cost housing, while the private sector focuses on middle-income housing, and this is a win-win situation for everyone. In the same vein, while our public sector investment program has been short on financing, many are surprised at how much we have been able to accomplish through careful planning and by reducing waste and corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, the government is reasonably confident that the economy will begin a slow recovery in 2018. This would initially be based on a strong turnaround of the energy sector as several new gas projects come on stream. The housing and infrastructure projects will provide many jobs and the much needed additional stimulation of the economy. The government is committed to aggressively pursuing all available solutions to solve the gas supply challenge in the shortest possible time frame. We opened 2017 without a settled price for new gas in the industry, and this had the effect of dampening investment initiatives in our major areas of gas production. My visit to Houston in late March brought the negotiating parties to a point where an agreement was reached between NGC and BP, our main producer, as well as EOG. This agreement not only had a ripple effect throughout the industry, but it immediately cleared the way for a $10 billion investment program over the next 5 years. This activity commenced immediately in 2017 and is the main driver in what is now the very buoyant drilling and production program. The country should be aware of the progress between Venezuela and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. By way of update, a heads of agreement was signed by President Maduro and myself in December 2016. And as a result, the relevant state enterprises of both countries signed cooperation agreements in March 2017. And we are very close to the final sign-off of a gas sales agreement which will clear the way for operations of a pipeline from the Dragon fields to the existing Hibiscus platform, involving PDVSA, NGC, and Shell. On completion of this historic bilateral development, the way will become clear for immediate access to 150 million standard cubic feet of much-needed gas for the sustenance of our industrial plants in Point Lisas. Petrotrin has contributed significantly to the growth and development of Trinidad and Tobago, but is now in need of fundamental restructuring, which cannot be put off any longer. A cabinet-appointed committee and a new board conducted various reviews of Petrotrin's operations and identified many structural problems, such as an unwieldy operational structure and poor governance, declining crude oil production, declining productivity, escalating manpower costs, steadily increasing maintenance and capital costs, low refinery margins, and poor asset quality. These financial and operational reviews indicate that if we do nothing, then the company stands to make losses of approximately $1.5 billion over the next 5 years, going forward alongside huge risks from aged and dangerous infrastructure. A combination of these components, with a 50% decrease in the company's revenues and negative net working capital position, has forced the company to resort to government-guaranteed revolving credit facilities to assist in the purchase of imported crude oil, which is refined at a continuous loss. Petrotrin's debt burden now stands at close to 13 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars, which includes 2 large US dollar loans, one for $850 million and the other for $750 million, which mature in 2019 and 2022 respectively. Only last Wednesday, the Cabinet received a series of specific presentations from the new board to address Petrotrin's many challenges in order to ensure its long-term sustainability. It is our intention to fix Petrotrin's problems once and for all in 2018, so that the company can service its debt and taxes, thereby contributing to government's revenue and the country's development in the way that it should, as well as providing job security for an adequate quota of high-performing employees. I come now to a thorny issue which has crossed over 3 administrations. I refer to the resolution of the CL Financial CLICO matter. Fellow citizens, I am pleased to report that we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel of the CLICO CLF restructuring exercise. You may recall, ladies and gentlemen, that in June 2009, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, CLF directors, and a majority of CLF shareholders entered into a shareholders agreement which was extended 17 times up to 2016. The intention of this agreement was to repay the substantial sum of $23 billion of taxpayers' money as a bailout to CLICO, a privately owned company. However, this repayment never materialized as anticipated. In 2017, $15 billion of debt owed to the government was not appearing as a liability at CLF, and under the guidance of former government ministers, the private shareholders refused to continue extending the terms of the agreement and moved for an AGM to take back control from the government without fully acknowledging a debt to the taxpayer of $15 billion, nor making any satisfactory provision to repay the outstanding monies. To date, the government has been repaid just over $8 billion by CLICO, which has left the balance outstanding to the government at $15 billion. The government in 2017 successfully applied to the court to wind up the company in order to liquidate the assets and repay the taxpayers. This bold but necessary action had the effect of securing the public interest, and the asset transfer process is proceeding apace. In order to ensure the widest possible public participation in ownership of these shares, it is our intention that the major assets of the group, as they become available from the liquidators, will be placed in a newly created National Investment Fund, the NIF, and where units will be available for purchase by all. The creation of this fund has already commenced with the transfer of CLICO's shares in Angostura to the corporation sole, as part of the continuing effort to recover the debt owed by CLICO to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And as more assets become available, such as shares in the Republic Bank and other listed companies, they will be placed in this National Investment Fund. The plan is to have the new investment fund established and units available to the public and institutions for purchase before the middle of 2018. It is noteworthy that we do not believe that it is in the public interest that the CLF and CLICO companies be sold to selected private individuals, but rather that these assets should be preserved and maintained for the benefit of all citizens who would share in them by purchasing units in the NIF or through UTC, or be a beneficiary through the NIB. On another front, our policy focus continues to be on expanding trade arrangements and on efforts to improve the ease of doing business. Already, investment projects valued at about $1 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars have been approved for possible implementation during 2018. In addition, we are actively seeking to attract investment through the development of ICT hubs and industrial parks. In Moruga, we have the Agro Park. In Phoenix Park, we are doing a 133-acre industrial estate. Given our geographical position, we are also pursuing a possible major investment in the International Maritime Industry Service. We are also currently supporting a full-fledged feasibility study for a downstream investment plant to make aluminum products for the export market. We are strengthening our monitoring capability, and we are making progress in filling our business analyst and research officers' positions. We have recruited 6 additional auditors for the Central Audit Unit as evidence of our commitment to strengthening the internal audit function of all state enterprises. Notwithstanding the very tight financial situation, the government has made provisions to carry on a development program which will contribute significantly towards economic activity. This is in addition to the already mentioned aggressive public-private partnership housing program. Here are some of the examples of the development projects which are completed or in progress. We have the Arima and Point Fortin hospitals under construction, both scheduled for completion in 2019. A new Sangre Grande hospital is in the advanced planning stage. Search continues to identify a suitable operator for the Couva Hospital. If by April we are unsuccessful, immediate steps will be initiated to integrate the facility into the existing healthcare delivery system. Expressions of interest for the construction of a new 540-bed central block at the Port of Spain Hospital have been invited. This closes on January 30th, 2018. Besson Street, Maracas St. Joseph, and St. Joseph police stations were completed in 2017 and are now fully operational. Construction of St. Clair Police Station is scheduled to resume in January 2018. Construction is now underway at Roxborough and Old Grange Shervan Police Station in Tobago. Proposals are also invited for the Moruga Agro Processing and Light Manufacturing and Industrial Park. Construction is scheduled to commence in 2018. We have 17 community centers currently under construction. The Roxborough Administrative Complex is under construction, and the Regional Corporation Administrative Buildings at Diego Martin and Pinal are scheduled for commencement of construction in 2018. The restoration of the Red House is in progress and scheduled for completion at the end of 2018. The restoration of Stallmeyer's Castle is completed, and work is to begin on Whitehall in 2018. The Brian Lara Stadium was completed in 2017, and the Diego Martin Sporting Complex, which is under construction, is scheduled for completion in mid-2018. The Carenage Fishing Complex is also under construction and scheduled for completion in early 2018. Proposals are to be invited shortly for the construction of a new international airport terminal in Crown Point, Tobago in 2018 on a build-own lease transfer bolt basis. Construction is scheduled to commence on this project in 2018 for completion by 2020. With respect to the Toko Ferry Port, preliminary designs are completed and environmental permits are currently being secured. Moruga Fishing Port, designs are in progress. With respect to the Valencia to Toko Road, the route selection is completed and detailed design is to commence early in 2018. With respect to the Currap to Valsayn flyover, construction is scheduled to commence in early 2018. Extension of the Churchill Roosevelt Highway to Manzanilla Construction of the first 5 kilometers of this new highway is to commence in early 2018. With respect to the Point 14 highway, construction resumed in June 2017. Work is in progress on South Trunk Road from Dumfries Road to St. Mary's Junction, and on bridges at Mosquito Creek and on the Godino River. More construction packages are to commence on this project in 2018, such as the Southern Main Road to Dunlop Roundabout, Mondesir to Eccles Trace, St. Mary's Junction to Mondesir, bridge works at Guapo, Mondesir, and on the Oropouche River. With respect to our tourism and recreational facilities, the Maracas beach upgrade, we've seen the car park completed along with the roadway. Vending booths and public bathrooms and water treatment plants are scheduled for completion in early 2018. There are a number of coastal protection projects, some of which have commenced in 2017 and which will continue through 2018. These are at Point Coco, Sans Souci, Queenam, Matlot, Grand Riviere, and we are making management plans for the project at Manjanilla Beach. 2017 was a more than challenging year for the Port Authority and the people of Tobago in particular. The cargo ferry service provider broke his contract and withdrew the vessel when wholly unacceptable terms could not be met. The passenger ferry service also presented challenges due to the absence of routine dry docking during the earlier years. The tender process for a substitute passenger vessel became the 6th consecutive aborted tender on the port. In the face of this, a cabinet subcommittee was immediately instituted to contact and engage international brokers to locate a suitable vessel for lease, using NIDCO as the contracting party. During the search, a suitable new vessel, which had not been put into service, was found by one broker, and this vessel was available for sale. We had all the necessary inspection, examination, certification checks, and sea trials done on this vessel. And after all satisfactory reports were obtained, steps have now been taken to purchase this vessel. On completion of this process, the vessel should arrive in the country within weeks from a port in Asia. The introduction of this vessel on the sea bridge should see a dramatic improvement in the service capacity and reliability that would bring considerable relief to the long-suffering people of Tobago from the early months of 2018. Fellow citizens, it should be clear to all that we are a nation with many challenges. But what should also be clear is that we are not a nation without hope. Let us behave like a responsible people who are prepared to put our shoulders to the wheel and make our individual presence felt. There is much more adjustment to come before we clear these dangerous rapids towards calm waters. Let our collective New Year resolution be, together we are stronger, strong enough to get it done. Let's do this, and may God continue to richly bless Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for your attention.